Michoacan Mexico, 1967. A baby boy is born into a family of avocado farmers in one of the poorest rural communities in Western Mexico. No electricity, no running water, no future that anyone looking at that village could have predicted would lead anywhere extraordinary. Just dirt roads, avocado trees, and the kind of grinding poverty that makes people either break completely or build something savage just to survive. That baby boy was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, and 59 years later, when Mexican Special Forces killed him in February 2026, he was the most wanted drug lord on Earth. He commanded an army of 30,000 soldiers. He had shot down military helicopters. He had a $10 million bounty on his head from the United States government. He had terrorized an entire nation for 15 years and built the most violent criminal organization in the Western Hemisphere from absolutely nothing. This is the story of how he got there, from avocado fields in Michoacan to a billion-dollar cartel empire. And it starts in a place so ordinary, so forgotten, that nobody who grew up there was ever supposed to matter to anyone outside that valley. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was born on July 17, 1967, in Villa Corona, Jalisco. Some sources place his earliest years in the Tierra Caliente region of Michoacan, and the truth is that his early childhood moved between both areas as his family followed work and opportunity in the way that poor rural Mexican families have always done. Tierra Caliente, the hot land, is one of the most challenging regions in all of Mexico. Brutal heat, difficult terrain, communities so isolated from Mexican federal government presence that the state has historically been almost entirely absent from daily life. No reliable police, no reliable courts, no reliable social services, just families, land, and the informal power structures that fill the vacuum when government abandons a region entirely. This environment does something specific to the people who grow up in it. It teaches them that the only authority that matters is the authority you can enforce yourself, that rules exist for people who have the luxury of following them, that survival is not a given, but something you fight for every single day against heat and poverty and the absolute indifference of a government that has never cared whether you lived or died. His family grew avocados. Michoacan is now famous internationally for its avocado production. The state supplies a massive percentage of the avocados consumed in the United States. But in the 1960s and 1970s, avocado farming in rural Michoacan was not a path to wealth. It was subsistence. It was working land that belonged to you only as long as nobody more powerful decided they wanted it. It was a life measured in harvests and dry seasons, and the constant arithmetic of whether this year's crop would cover this year's debts. Nemesio grew up watching his family work that land, watching the gap between the effort required and the reward received, watching the way that men with connections, men with money, men with power operated in an entirely different Mexico than the one his family inhabited. And watching all of that would have planted something in him that rural poverty plants in certain kinds of people. Not resignation, but fury. Not acceptance, but calculation. He was going to find another way. The only question was what that way would look like. At some point in the early to mid-1980s, young Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes did what hundreds of thousands of young Mexican men from poor rural communities did during that era. He headed north. He crossed the border into the United States and arrived in California, specifically the Bay Area, looking for work and a different life. California in the 1980s was a complicated place for undocumented Mexican immigrants. The work was real. Agriculture, construction, service industry, but the vulnerability was total. No legal status meant no protections, no ability to complain about exploitation without risking deportation, no access to the legal system if someone wronged you. You existed in the economy, but outside the law, which meant the law could reach you whenever it wanted, but you could never reach back. The Bay Area had large Mexican and Latino communities by this point, networks of people from similar regions, similar backgrounds, helping each other find work and housing and navigate a country that wanted their labor without wanting them. Nemesio moved through those networks and found work, but also found something else, the underground economy. Because here is what California also had in the 1980s that mattered enormously to what Nemesio would become. It had methamphetamine. The Bay Area was a significant hub for meth production and distribution during this era, before the drug's manufacturing moved more heavily into Mexican cartel infrastructure. And for a young man from rural Mexico with no legal options, no education credentials that American employers recognized, and an absolute refusal to spend his life in the same poverty his family had known, the drug economy offered something legitimate work never could: real money, fast. In 1986, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was 19 years old when San Francisco police arrested him for stealing property and carrying a loaded firearm. He was deported back to Mexico. He came back. In 1989, he was arrested again in the Bay Area for selling narcotics, deported again. He came back again. There is something important in that pattern. He was deported twice and came back twice. That tells you something of the level of determination that was already operating inside this young man. Deportation for most people is a final answer. For Nemesio, it was a temporary interruption. He had decided California was where he needed to be, and a deportation order was not going to change that calculation. By the early 1990s, he was in Sacramento, deeper into methamphetamine operations. In 1992, federal drug charges caught up with him in Sacramento, and he was arrested, convicted, and this time deported in a way that made return essentially impossible. Federal drug convictions created a legal barrier to re-entry that was far harder to circumvent than simple deportation. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes left the United States in 1992 carrying a federal drug conviction, a decade of street experience, a thorough education in how American drug markets worked, and an absolutely more important than any of that: connections, relationships built in the underground economy of California that would matter enormously when he started building his own organization in Mexico. He was 25 years old, and his American chapter was over, but everything he had learned there was coming back to Mexico with him. When Nemesio returned to Mexico permanently after 1992, he carried his California experience into the world of Mexican organized crime that was expanding rapidly during that era. The Sinaloa cartel, under figures like El Chapo, was consolidating power. The Gulf cartel was operating. The entire landscape of Mexican drug trafficking was in a period of violent reorganization as older structures broke down and new ones fought for territory. Nemesio moved through this world and eventually connected with the Milenio Cartel, one of the organizations operating in Jalisco and surrounding states during the late 1990s and early 2000s.
He was building a reputation, building operational experience, learning the infrastructure of large-scale drug trafficking at a level that went far beyond the street-level dealing he had done in California. But the single most important event of this entire period, more important than any cartel connection, more important than any operational skill he was developing, was a marriage. In 1996, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes married Rosalinda González Valencia. And this marriage was not simply two people deciding to build a life together. This was a merger between two criminal bloodlines that would create the financial and operational foundation for everything that came afterward. Rosalinda came from the González Valencia family, a family that had started, like Nemesio's, in rural agricultural Mexico. They had grown up farming in Michoacan as well, initially legitimate crops, before transitioning into cultivating marijuana and opium poppies during the 1970s. By the time Rosalinda married Nemesio in 1996, her family had been in the drug business for roughly 2 decades and had developed something that most criminal organizations never achieve: genuine financial sophistication. Her brothers were building what would become Los Queenies, the financial arm that would later power CJNG's international operations. Her brother, Abigail González Valencia, El Queenie, understood international banking, offshore accounts, shell companies, and money laundering at a level that rivaled legitimate financial institutions. The González Valencia family had assets across multiple countries, bank accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, and legitimate business holdings that made their criminal proceeds almost impossible to trace. Nemesio brought violence, street credibility, operational expertise, and the hunger of a man who had spent years building something in the most difficult conditions imaginable. The González Valencia family brought money, financial infrastructure, international connections, and the sophisticated business architecture that transforms a drug trafficking operation into a true criminal empire. The marriage created something neither side could have built alone, and it planted the seeds of what would eventually become the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Through the late 1990s and into the 2000s, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, now known as El Mencho, was rising through the ranks of the Milenio Cartel, also known as the Valencia Cartel, which operated primarily in Jalisco, Colima, and Michoacan. This organization was one of the dominant trafficking groups in Western Mexico during this period, moving cocaine and other drugs through Pacific Coast routes into the United States. Working within the Milenio structure gave Nemesio something his California years and his street experience alone never could have: scale. He learned how large-scale international drug trafficking actually operated, how you coordinate shipments across multiple states, how you manage relationships with corrupt government officials, how you build an enforcement apparatus that can protect your operation through violence when necessary and through bribery when possible, how you structure an organization so that it can survive the arrest or death of individual members without collapsing entirely. He was, by all accounts from this period, a serious and capable operator. Not flashy, not the kind of cartel figure who made himself visible through excess or arrogance. He was learning, building relationships, and establishing himself as someone who could be trusted with significant operational responsibilities. The Milenio Cartel began fracturing in the mid-2000s as internal conflicts and government pressure took their toll. Various factions split off, allied with other organizations, or simply collapsed. This kind of organizational fracturing is actually a critical moment for ambitious figures within any criminal organization, because it creates opportunity. When the structure above you breaks apart, the people with the most capability, the most connections, and the most determination get to build something new from the pieces. Nemesio was positioned perfectly to capitalize on that moment. He had the operational experience. He had the family connections through his marriage to Rosalinda. He had the financial backing of the Gonzalez Valencia family. And he had something that cannot be taught or bought: the particular combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, and absolute refusal to accept limitations that separates the people who build empires from the people who simply work within them. By the late 2000s, he was ready to stop working for someone else's organization and start building his own. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, emerged formally around 2009 to 2010 from the remnants of the Milenio Cartel. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, now known as El Mencho, was its founding leader and driving force. The name itself was a statement: new generation. Not the old cartel structures that had dominated Mexican organized crime for decades, not the Sinaloa model of trafficking-focused organizations. Something new, something that understood that the landscape of Mexican organized crime had changed and that the organizations that would dominate the next era would need to operate differently. El Mencho built CJNG on several principles that distinguished it immediately from other Mexican cartels. First, extreme violence as a primary tool, not just violence as a means of settling specific disputes or eliminating specific threats, but violence deployed as a message, as a branding strategy, as a way of establishing that CJNG would respond to any challenge with a level of force that made challenging them simply not worth the cost. Public executions, mass killings, bodies displayed as messages. The violence was always strategic, always designed to communicate something specific to specific audiences: rivals, government, civilian populations, potential recruits. Second, military structure and military equipment. El Mencho had seen how traditional cartel security operated, and he understood its limitations. He built CJNG's enforcement arm more like a military unit than a criminal gang. Trained personnel, command structure, communication protocols, and weaponry that went far beyond what any previous Mexican cartel had deployed. RPGs, .50 caliber machine guns, armored vehicles, eventually his own SWAT-style teams. The organization that shot down a Mexican military helicopter in 2015, an event that shocked the entire country and the international community, was the product of years of deliberate military-style development that El Mencho had been overseeing from the beginning.